I normally don't do winemaking posts, but in this case, I think I have to make an exception in order to explain what our Marquette Grand Reserve is. It's my attempt at elevating our multi-international gold medal winning Marquette, which is really hard to do. So forgive me while I put my winemaking chemistry science nerd cap on to explain this vintage to you. Our Marquette was sent out to 28 international competitions, and it came home with 28 medals. It's never lost, not once. So the question is, how do you improve on that? Well, here's what we did. First, we started with a great crop of Marquette grapes. Great wine always starts with great fruit, and 2019 was an exception. It was a very hot, dry summer here in Ontario, Canada. We got a gorgeous crop of rich berries, really high sugar bricks at 27, which is kind of mostly unheard of in our area. With those rich grapes for the Marquette Grand Reserve, here's what I did. I split the grapes right in half. With the first half of the fruit, I fermented it with the exact same yeast that I import from Tasmania to reduce volatile acidity. Exactly, again, with the same oenological methods that I always use to make our award-winning Marquette. But with the other half, I pressed the fruit out to make a Marquette Rosé, which will be debuting soon. After I pressed out the fruit to make the rosé, I then added those pressed skins back to the other half, thereby doubling the skins in my primary fermentation. Then I added bentonite clay immediately to strip any volatiles or unstable green aromatics and lipid transfer proteins from the must. So my mission is to get it as smooth as possible. You got to understand that double the grape skins means double the work. The stuff was like oatmeal, really, really tough to work with. Really thick caps, a lot more surface area, which is the benefit because more skin contact, more surface area on those berries means more depth and more flavor. So essentially, I'm making Marquette on steroids. Higher ester compounds to heighten olfaction properties, higher eugenols, deeper flavonoids, more complex tannin structures, and increased terpenes and thiols, more pronounced esters and aldehydes, all coming together in this symphony to enrich the end product. And that was my mission. I don't follow the rules. I don't add a malolactic fermentation 1/3 into the primary fermentation, which is a standard industry model. I do it right away. And then I do it again after the first rack. It's expensive, but I notice a lot of wines are only half mellowed, which gives it that battery acid quality that I think is awful for reds. For me, it's better to double it up. And you can get away with it early if you have high bricks, and only if, just like this vintage has. So that's what I did. It just makes for a smoother wine. This is a challenge, especially for Ontario wines, as we don't have the sun to knock out the acidity like California or southern France. So my mission is to always, always, always focus on the acidity, especially when it comes to our reds. In Ontario, we make great whites, we make great rosés, and we make great delicate reds like Pinot here. But to compete with those rich, jammy reds from California here in Ontario requires far more patience and far more work. To make it even richer, or to balance or fatten a wine, the government rule here in Ontario is 5% of a blend of something else into it. If you want to keep the varietal name. So if you want to make a Cabernet Sauvignon and you want to fatten it up with a little Cab Franc for taste or depth or mouthfeel, you're only allowed to add 5% into that Cabernet Sauvignon, which is essentially the neck of the bottle. Go to 6% or higher, and now you can no longer call it Cabernet Sauvignon. You have to call it a blend name. So 5% is the limit. Well, there's some things here in Ontario, Canada that I think we just can't do, and that is Corvina, Appassimento, Amarone. I mean, we can grow it and we can make it, but it doesn't have the depth of those long degree hotter climate days of the Veneto region or places, west of Rhone, Italy. Just because we can grow a grape varietal here in Canada, the Northeast, doesn't mean you should. Our Malbecs, for example, grown in Ontario, will never have the richness or complexity of Argentina, Mendoza Malbecs. So it's important to have the right grapes in the ground, and that's why we choose Marquette. It's an early ripener, it has high sugars, it's cold and disease resistant. It's a very rich red, which is perfect for Ontario. For my Marquette Grand Reserve, we imported and added very expensive Amarone Corvina grapes from Italy to our vintage at 5% to stay within legal regulations. These grapes were green pruned at one cluster of grapes per plant, which I think is nuts. I mean, so much can go wrong. You know, birds can eat the cluster, bugs, hail, etc. But if you pull it off, that means that all the sun's energy goes to one really rich, potent, decadent cluster of Amarone Corvina grapes. So, which I think is interesting, but the Italians even take it further. They dehydrate that cluster halfway to a raisin, which is half the volume of unparalleled richness, which is the art of appassimento, and that's why Amarone appassimentos are just so lavish. Finally, it comes to barreling. After we added the Amarone to enrich in that, just to give it that round fullness to the back, I had to barrel it. So I think vanilla and esters is what makes our Marquette the award winner, and that's 6 months in T. Boswell, Missouri, American Quercus alba oak. I don't want a vanilla bomb like most wineries tend to lean towards. My mentors always schooled me in barrel aging for balance. So I think that barreling a wine should be like adding, salt or pepper to a meal. You want to enhance and complement the fruit. You don't want to overpower it. 6 months is my recipe in specifically this barrel. So, hey, the Marquette has never lost, 28 competitions, 28 medals. So I did the exact same thing for barrel aging. But this time I took it a step a little further. So what I did this time for the Marquette Grand Reserve is that I imported Sanguin-Marolles French Burgundy Quercus Betrayal oak barrels. I chose Burgundy oak barrels because of the Marquette's Pinot Noir Burgundy lineage and parentage. This barrel is one of the most expensive 59-gallon barrels that money can buy at almost 4,000 euros a piece, plus shipping and brokerage fees. And I aged it in that for another 6 months in the new French, just to balance out that more pronounced coconut and vanilla American oak flavor with more elegant spice qualities, silkier tannins, more savory with subtle tobacco and cedar spices that this barrel is specifically famous for. After the barrel aging, as a final step, we of course did cold stabilization and removed any weakness or thinness in the vintage by removing the wine water ice slush that forms on the top of the vintage. Water, of course, is one of the few elements where ice will form at the top. And what this does, if you freeze it, you condense the flavors below. In these sub-zero temperatures, this is how we get rid of the weakness of our red wines. We pull the water ice off the top. Ice will float to the top, and that's the weakness of the wine. What remains, of course, is a product loss. However, what's left is far richer and higher alcohol content. Most other wineries consider this very wasteful because we actually have to throw out about 20% of the vintage as thinner water ice. But what remains is far superior quality. So essentially this method is the exact opposite of amelioration. It's very labor intensive, but it's guided from the vine to the glass in a way that I felt quality was what I'm after. I want quality, and so I guided this entire vintage to the end, and I think I did the very best I could. Truly, I honestly don't know what more I can do to elevate this vintage to the next level, and I hope you enjoy it.